Hello there, hi, welcome back to Adventures in Music with me, Jim, where we listen to, talk about, and do all sorts of things music-y. Now, this is the overview from Stephen Wilson. It has been out today for 1 week. It came out on Friday last week, so it is 1 week old exactly, and has a very good chance of being a number one album this weekend in the UK. And probably elsewhere as well. I don't know, but it's certainly here. Is doing very, very well with it. This is up for album of the month on the poll for this channel, and of course, it is winning. It's going to win. I can't sort of get away from the fact that this is going to win album of the month, and we will be listening to it in its entirety next Monday. I think the last day of the month. So when we get there, we'll be listening to this album. It won't be my first listen. And I think you can understand from my point of view, it won't be my first listen. I heard this in November, sitting in a room with Stephen Wilson in London. I heard it then. I have heard it a week or so ago when it came out on Veeps. I've heard it multiple times since then, and I absolutely love it. I still genuinely stand by the comments that I made when I made the video for my listening in November. Now, obviously, with some repeated listenings, I can't hear it again for the first time. So that initial thrill, that shine, that excitement of that very, very first listen has been dulled a little bit. So it's diluted. But I still stand by the comments that I made. I know I put my neck on the line, and I said I think this is probably one of the greatest things he's ever done. I do genuinely believe that. And I have seen over the last week or so a lot of reviews from other people. Some of them quite positive, some of them very positive, some not so. And I just don't quite understand where, not necessarily the negativity has come from, but the confusion. Because I don't think there's anything on this record that is not what he's told us was coming. Absolutely, it is progressive rock. It is absolutely modern progressive rock. It has nods back to the 1970s. Of course it does. There are moments of lots of moments of Yes and Floyd, of David Bowie in there. I mean, you can hear Space Oddity in this. I mean, it's a really obvious sort of callback to that. But there's also a lot of Stephen Wilson himself, so callbacks to his previous works. So you can hear moments of the Harmony Codex. You can hear parts of The Sky Moves Sideways from Porcupine Tree all the way back when, and a smattering of everything in between. It's all in there. There are moments that you hear in here. There are motifs, there are sounds, there are techniques, there are chord progressions, there are the way things are played. So, oh, that's a Stephen Wilsonism. Is that a word? I don't know. I just made it up. It could be, it might not be, but I'm using it now. And you recognise that as being Stephen Wilson. And I think that's fine. There are several, I think, complaints about this album that I don't really think stand up to scrutiny. I mean, a lot of people are saying it feels a little bit disjointed, that there are, although it's a big, long track on each side, it's very clearly broken up into what should be individual songs. Now, I get that in a way. Of course I do. And I think to have a whole track as a massive, long piece without having any sort of markers as to where you are would make it very, very difficult. But I don't think he's done anything different than a lot of other prog rock bands have done back in the day when we had very, very long pieces of music that was split into individual sections. I mean, think about 2112, for example, where how that starts, stops, changes halfway through, and nobody complains about that. So I think it's a bit of an unusual complaint to say that this feels like it's different parts within the same track. The certainly a lot of the themes, the sounds, the chord structure that is used comes back. There are callbacks to it throughout the whole of side one. And so that ties it all together. And I feel that from the very, very, very beginning, when you have just Stephen Wilson's voice asking about whether there are ghosts, going through all of the tracks, it feels fluid to me. And I know people have said there's awkward stops and changes and stuff. I don't feel that. I just recognise the music I recognise the track as being almost like a symphony. You have movements within it. So you move from one part to the next to the next. And I think it works really, really well. And I stand by that. I genuinely stand by that. My favourite part of this side is the bit "Objects Outlive Us," meanwhile, which does actually feel like a track in its own right. I mean, it has been released now on YouTube with a video as a track in its own right. So I get why Stephen has done it. He wants to sort of have the grandeur of having these big long pieces, but it could have been broken into smaller tracks. Now, call me a cynic. I have bought this, which is the disconnected version, in which all the individual parts within the tracks, the two tracks, are now being split up into their little bits. So Objects Outlive Us, parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the overview, parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it could have been done, but he decided not to initially. Why this then? Well, this is why I say call me a cynic. I think this is about trying to get a #1 album. This is about giving another version that people can buy in the UK to try and get more sales of the album he's already got. So I already bought that, of course I did, and I've got the album. So yeah, bit of a mug. I don't say to take all my money, Stephen, because I'm not quite there, but it's quite nice to have the record and the CD. And of course that came out. I had to get that as well. Side 2, or the second part if you're listening to it on CD, the overview itself, I really, really, really like this track. I like the way it uses some like almost trip-hoppy electronic elements, but they lead into what becomes a much grander rock song as it goes on. You have the guitar solos, you have saxophone solos, you have a Moog solo, and it just is awesome. There are some complaints from people about the spoken word part on here from Rotem Wilson, Stephen's wife, who reads out a never-ending, seemingly, list of numbers, and these are galactic sizes. So it's the representation of astral sizes, trying to put some context to the scale of what it is that's being talked about. And I think it's entirely appropriate. I know a lot of people have found this probably the most difficult part or the most controversial part of the album. Controversial, I don't know if that's the right word, but the bit they like least. And I think it's entirely appropriate, and it is right, and it is there to try and convey or help convey this overwhelming scale of the universe, which is just incomprehensible. And we know space is big. Space is big. I mean, yeah, man, space is big. Space is so incredibly big that it's impossible to try and grapple with. And I can't even begin to think about it. And by talking about measurable things that we have some concept of, you are presented with an idea of the vastness of it. Without any of us being able to go into space ourselves, look back at the planet and actually experience the overview effect in person, the closest we're ever going to get to understanding or have any inkling of understanding of the vastness of, in effect, eternity is by having some numbers. Because you can understand 10, if you can understand 100, if you can understand 1,000, and you can understand 1,000,000, then you can start to understand 10 million, 1,000,000 million, 100 million million, millions to the power of 10. And they are huge, huge numbers, and you have to try. You don't have to, but if you want to experience what he's trying to convey and talk about, you need to have some sense of the scale of things. And I think, therefore, it's absolutely right that these are in there. Had I been Stephen Wilson myself, I'd obviously been a lot wealthier than I am now and living the best life. But I think my view of mixing this would have been, I'd have started off with the spoken word very loud, very forward in the mix, like it is, but gradually faded it and moved it to one side, or to the left or to the right. And where perhaps the music then fades down, you could still hear these numbers repeating in the background, just saying it's an infinite thing. It's still there, still counting, still going. I think that would have been quite effective. However, I'm not Stephen Wilson. I'm not wealthy. I'm not living his best life. So we'll go with how he's presented it to us, and I suspect it is the right way because he is the artist and he has the vision. I love side one as well. The objects outlive us. I don't know. I just think I can't argue with any of this music at all. I think he's presented and given us music that we were all asking for. There is music on here that sounds like it is inspired by some of the other stuff that he's done in the past that we love so much. But he's not going to repeat what he's done before. Who wants that? Who really wants that? You're looking at a tribute act rather than a vital and original artist. So he's got to be inspired and influenced by his past work. Of course he is. Any artist is. But he's always trying to push forward and try and do new things. And for that, he ought to be applauded. And I think, on the whole, this is a really, really successful record. I think it's going to stand the test of time very, very well, certainly from my point of view. And I have loved every moment of it. I've loved being with it. I've loved listening to it in the car, listening to it on headphones when I'm out for a walk. Loved listening to it on the computer, watching the accompanying video that goes with it. And I cannot wait to hear this live in May when it's performed with the band. So, yeah, all in all, I've got to say, I think this is a really, really, really grand album, grand ambition, and realised really, really well. And let's all get together again in a week's time, or just over a week's time, and see what you think when we listen to it together. So when it wins Album of the Month. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave it there, and I'll see you all on the next video, whenever and whatever that is. Until then, this is Jim, over and out.